aggressive action TV show. Listen, ladies and gentlemen, we have a very, very, very important discussion today with two retired NYPD lieutenants. And they're going to give their experience from two different viewpoints. And I feel that this conversation is going to be so important because we have two honest individuals, two people with experience, two people who is not afraid to speak their minds. And I'm not going to waste any more time. I would like to welcome retired Lieutenant John Macari, who was on the show last week, by the way, and retired Lieutenant Edwin Raymond. Thank you guys for joining us tonight. How you guys doing?
Awesome, man. Thank you for having us.
All good, same.
No problem. First of all, I've never conducted a conversation like this. I've never had so many NYPD people text me and call me as soon as I announced this show. So a lot of your old former coworkers and friends are tuning in to have this conversation. And I would like to thank my NYPD people for promoting the show for me, for telling me they was looking forward to the show. But I don't want to waste no time because this time the show is not about me, it's about you guys. And I want to start with Edwin. Edwin, can you tell the people a little bit about yourself who may be unfamiliar? Like I see a lot of people, when I speak to people, they be like, he looks familiar. I seen his face before, but now we want to solidify where they seen you, where they know you from.
Absolutely. And first, Tramel, again, thanks for having this discussion. I've been on John's show. One of the things that we concluded on is we have to have these conversations more. I'm ready to do this anytime. So Edwin Raymond, born and raised in Flatbush. My parents migrated from Haiti. It was a different Brooklyn. It was a different New York City back then. It was impoverished, but kept my head on straight. Around the age of 15, unfortunately, cops started harassing me, like everyone else in the community. They didn't see a difference between me and some of the folks that were actually causing some trouble. And after a few years of this harassment, I made a decision in my late teens that shocked a lot of people. I chose to join the police department, which I did at 22 years old. I retired last year. It hasn't even been a year yet, after 15 years in the rank of lieutenant. But prior to reaching lieutenant, I analyzed the police department. I saw what I felt were the issues. I tried to speak internally. It wasn't well received, so I was forced to become a whistleblower 8 years ago and had to fight for my promotions to sergeant and then lieutenant. Featured in a documentary that gives a crash course in some of the work that I've done. It's called Crime and Punishment, available on Hulu, and it's for free on YouTube. And I continue to use my voice to move the needle in the right direction.
Now, you forgot something. We have your book here.
Yeah.
Right? Tell them a little bit about the book also. We're going to dive a little deeper into it,
Sure.
Later on in the conversation.
Sure. So, recent author just published my memoir back in October. I chose to do a memoir because I felt it was crucial that the reader understands who I am as a man, what I've been through as a child, the things that help form my morals, my perspective, and for them to understand I've always been very analytical and kind of walk to the beat of my own drum. It has to make sense to me. I don't care where it's coming from. It has to make sense to me. So, the book has been, everyone who's read it has said it's surpassed their expectations. Even those who typically don't even agree with me on things, they said they learned a lot. I've had some of the higher ranking folks who have read it. They said there are things that their inspectors, captains, deputy inspectors, that they were unaware of. So, the book is doing what it needs to do.
Lieutenant Macari, remind the people where they may know you from.
Just call me John, brother. That's it. First, but before I even go on myself, I just want to say, not only did I read Edwin's book, I listened to it. I bought the audio version, and I recommend everybody do that as well, because I like having the hard copy of books as well as the audio. Great book. I really felt like Edwin put me in his eyes and in his shoes, and I walked through his path. And, for me, I was born in Bensonhurst. I was born, my mother was a school crossing guard. My father was a Vietnam veteran. We really didn't have much money, much means. At 8 years old, unfortunately, Yusef Hawkins was murdered in my neighborhood. It was a very racial tension time in Bensonhurst, between Bensonhurst and the Black community. There were marches every Sunday in my neighborhood. And I got to see New York City politics firsthand at a very young age. I got to see horrific violence at a young age, followed by horrific politics on both sides of it, and really lies being strewn throughout the community. I grew up like Edwin. I moved to Staten Island in my teens, again, all Italian neighborhood. My first time that I was arrested, I was 11 years old. I was arrested again, I believe, when I was 19. I was stopped numerous times by the police, and I really took the job not to change the world, but because I just felt it was a good job, and I thought it was something that I could do. I felt I had good experience. I had great knowledge in New York City. I was very familiar with New York City. And to be perfectly honest, I wasn't afraid of other people. So I just thought it was something that I could be good at and do good. I wanted to do good. I was never really a bad kid. I did hang out in some bad places, were around some bad people, but me, myself, I always wanted to do the right thing, look to do the right thing, treat people with respect. And, and I thrived in my career. I did anti-crime for 13 years, both as a cop and as a sergeant, field intelligence, plainclothes work, where I did a lot of broken windows policing, same type of the tactics that were deployed on myself, on Edwin. And I really, truly got to understand from a top-down perspective how to combat crime in neighborhoods. I did that. I rose my way up to the rank of lieutenant. At that point, I was in an administrative position, and basically, the vaccine mandate ended my career. I submitted a religious exemption, that was denied. I submitted a medical exemption because I had antibodies, that was denied. And bigger than even myself, just being a lieutenant, I was in a pretty unique position where I was in charge of about 800 civilians. I just could not myself fire anybody or put anybody out on leave because they didn't want to put something in their body. And I just saw the hypocrisy in New York City at that point. And I retired early. I retired with 18 years on, and I began speaking out on social media, and I created a podcast, New York's Finest Retired and Unfiltered podcast, the Finest Unfiltered for short. And I've been speaking out ever since in the media. And, it's a pleasure to be on here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So I want to ask the first question. You mentioned broken windows policing. And I'm asking this to both of you guys. And John, you can answer first. What is broken windows policing, and did you see it as being effective while you was on the job?
So in my contention, I believe broken windows is highly effective. Broken windows is a theory that was instituted in the 90s, I believe, by under Bill Bratton. So it was instituted, and the theory behind broken windows is this: if you go into a neighborhood and you see broken windows all over the floor, if you see it in a house or whatever, people are going to say, oh, this is a neighborhood, this is trash, more windows are going to get broken. So basically the theory behind it is, if we police the minor crimes, we'll stop the major ones from happening. If we stop the windows from getting broke, we'll stop the overall decay of a neighborhood. So me personally, I felt it was very effective.
How about you, Edwin?
I mean, yeah. So the definition is accurate. It was a social study done by college professors, researchers, that Bill Bratton read this article in 1982. The town that they experimented with was Newark PD. Bratton liked what he read. When he became the chief of transit, he implemented it there. And then years later, when Giuliani made him the commissioner of all of NYPD, it became the new gospel. Unlike this, I think this is where John and I, this is where we have the most opposing views. I don't support the theory at all. Listen, do I think there should be lawlessness and just because it's mine, it should be ignored? Not at all. A lot of people like to oversimplify what I'm saying, as if I'm saying, we shouldn't enforce anything. That is not what I'm calling for. But to treat these minor things as if they're these big things, or they're going to lead and stop to big things. Listen, every now and then, right? You stop someone for something minor, they could be wanted for something major. They might have an unlawful firearm or something else that is major. It does happen. I'm acknowledging that also happens. But the notion that just look at this. I'm evidence driven. The number one reason, up until very recently, because of changes in law and decriminalization, the number one reason why people are put in handcuffs for decades is marijuana. The number one reason why people are given tickets is open container. These are two things that happen in every neighborhood, even neighborhoods that don't have larger crime issues. Based on studies, they actually happen in large, more frequently in white areas that don't have issues with homicide and some of the more serious infractions that we see in impoverished areas. So the idea that these small things, there's some sort of correlation or causation to larger things is just not true. Again, Bill Bratton himself, he was pressed about this in 2015 and admitted there's nothing to support it empirically. I've studied Bratton. If you look up there, both of his books are up there. He is an academic. He believes in empirical research. He believes in peer review. And he's admitted that this thing that has made his career, there's nothing scientific behind it. And as someone that's from the community that has visited so many other communities, has worked in other communities, John, these behaviors are everywhere. The way that remember, we're young, we're in the police academy, there are people in these high positions. We're not questioning, political appointments. We're not questioning nepotism and cronyism. We think these people deserve these positions, and whatever they're feeding us, we accept it as the truth. John, from being on your show, from watching you, to me, it's like you're so intelligent. I don't know why you support this broken windows thing so much. Again, am I saying lawlessness? No. Am I saying to ignore the minor things? No. But this idea that that's how we stop major crime, I can't agree with that. That's not. There's other ways to do it. And again, I think the evidence shows itself. And the Godfather himself admitted that it's his gut that tells him that it works. I'm sorry, but to see what that over enforcement has done to in my neighborhood and other neighborhoods where people look like me, I can't rely on some man from Boston's gut. I can't do that.
Any response to that, John?
Yeah, absolutely. So I really go on the practical application of broken windows. So there were a lot of things that I agree with Edwin Raymond, where he brings in how broken windows, how just over policing, bringing in a police state isn't necessarily a great thing and isn't going to affect public safety. But I believe in policing minor crimes, and I've seen it firsthand, and I've actually taken it where we take complaints from the community, we go into that community, and we solve not only minor problems but major problems. We also use minor crimes to solve major crimes. This was a highly effective tool that we replaced. I'll just give a brief example. I come in off of my swing. I'm doing anti-crime. I did what I do every day. I read all the complaints in my precinct and the neighboring complaints. I would go into work 45 minutes early. I would read every complaint. I see that we have a rash of burglaries in a 2-block radius. So what do? I read all the 61s are complaint reports, and I see that they're all side entry apartments. They're all 2-family homes in Staten Island, and they're all side entries apartments. I go to the first home just to get a feel for the neighborhood and what's going on there. And what do I see as soon as I pull up? I see a car parked on the wrong side of the street, double parked. I pull right up to the car, right? This is broken windows because I want to see who's in that neighborhood. My main goal was identification. It wasn't to write a summons. It wasn't to do anything, but this is a minor crime, right? Double parking, wrong side of the street, not a big deal. As I approach the car, I see 2 males. They get very fidgety. I ask them to put their hands on the steering wheel. What do I see when I look into the center console? Jewelry, right? Jewelry right there. As I take them out of the car to question them, make sure they have no weapons on them, anything. That house had already been broken into. I get a 911 call that those individuals, there's a burglary around the block, and the property that's missing is a property that's in that car. And that's why I believe so heavily in broken windows, because I do believe targeted broken windows. I don't believe throwing out a big net and just hammering everybody for everything and bringing in this police state is good overall. But when we're going to hone down on crime, when you give me a specific problem with crime, enforcing minor crime is highly effective. And I still, and Edwin, we've discussed this before, I haven't heard another explanation as to how we do that other than what I just explained.
Yeah. So I mean, I'll jump right in. So here's the thing. First, I'll go macro, and then cities that did not implement broken windows, they all saw large plummets in crime. San Diego saw probably one of the steepest. Cities like Atlanta. This is in the 90s when New York, there's definitely a drop in crime in New York. But other cities that did not copy New York style, like cities that did copy New York style, they saw drops also. But again, the cities with the largest drops in crime did not copy New York style. From what crime was in the 90s and what it became in the late 90s, early 2000s, that happened nationwide, regardless of broken windows. And that's the specific scenario you just shared. You see, I mean, you said it, the broad brush fishnet method where we just, anything goes, you know, the fact that you can say you don't support that, I could appreciate. But let's be honest, that's what this job has been. That's what it was when I came on in 2008. Because in reality is, while you're putting out that fishnet, you will periodically get what you're looking for. But one of the problems with NYPD policy is it does not take into consideration the collateral damage. It does not take into consideration the amount of people that have to be harassed before we finally get that gun, before we finally get, you know, someone that's wanted for something major. And again, other communities don't, for the most part, don't get treated like that. You know, specifically white communities don't get treated like that. Like you, no matter what negative things, you know, white folks do, you will still be treated as an individual until you do something negative. And for that type of policy, that type of systemic racism to make it into the NYPD and become the gospel to the point where everyone's enforcing it. You know, I've met black chiefs down to special operations lieutenants who believe in this blindly because, again, when you're in your 20s in the police academy, paramilitary, everything is lockstep. We're not encouraged to think on this job. We're not encouraged to think. In 2022, the mayor had an all-in with executives, and he just wanted to hear their perspective on things. Each executive that went, they started repeating ComStat, like they started spewing out what they would say at ComStat. And the mayor has access to those records. He wanted to hear what they had to say, and they couldn't deliver it. Why? Because they've never been encouraged to think. It's not their faults. We're not encouraged. It's top down. I don't know how. That's pretty much how Ray Kelly did things, top down. You know, everything came from the police commissioner and the upper echelon, the kitchen cabinet, and everyone else was middle management down to the rank and file that had to actually go out there and do it. And before I passed the mic, I listened to DCPI every day. I read every paper. I Googled everything for years. And so many times, you know, the different DCPI, that's the Deputy Commissioner of Public Information, the people in charge of the media aspect of the NYPD, they would legitimately say things that we don't engage in, or we don't do, or we don't practice. And then I would go to roll call and be told to do those same things. And then that's when it hit me. Wait, I said to myself, if you have to lie to the public about what you're asking me to do, then I'd have to be a fool to actually go out there and do it. Because if it ever goes down, you can't defend me. As much as you want to, as much as you're going to try behind the scenes so I can get a soft landing, you cannot defend me. Because already the department's leadership has made it clear that we don't do these things that you're asking of me. These things that I'm doing, it's getting the results that you want, and I'm celebrated until it goes wrong. And then all of a sudden, everyone, you know, I know so many people who have reached out privately and said, you know, this is what I'm going through right now. I went from being the man, and now I'm under investigation, you know, and I'm like, they told you, know, you're not supposed to be doing these things. Like, yeah, but when they celebrated me for years. I said, well, everything has come into alignment, and here you are.
Now, within your speech just now, you brought up the word racism, and for me, being a civilian my whole entire life, I always felt that the NYPD was racist in some form or fashion because of the experiences that I had personally. with certain police officers pulling me over. How did you get this car? They line of questioning and things of that nature, right? And that's what led me to get a lawsuit against the city at one time against NYPD. Now, in your experience, how pervasive is the issue of racism within the NYPD? And I'm not talking externally. Let's talk internally. As far as, are Black officers treated different from white officers in your opinion?
I'll start with that, John. That's cool. So two things. One, bias, right? Bias is something that we are all susceptible to. We have to understand that. Where people are on the spectrum in terms of where their bias is, that can vary, but the most important thing to do is correct your bias when it's happening. That's discipline, right? Especially when it's implicit, you catch it, you correct it, and then you correct how you respond to it. So bias aside, one of the biggest lessons I've learned from being in law enforcement is officers are not nearly as autonomous as we may think. They are operating on what's incentivized. So by adding, how'd you get this car? That's the bias. But stopping you in the community that you're in, because of things happening in that community, that's because of what's incentivized. And one of the things that I realize is many times they believe they're doing what's right. The intentions are well. There's a real issue of crime in these areas. So this is what we do. We stop cars. We, whatever the tactics are, stop and frisk, summonses, stopping cars, etc. This is how they initiate the stop, hoping to lead to bigger issues, letting people know there's, that the police are out here, they're paying attention, etc. But the problem where it becomes systemic racism, and what I've found is this has been the most difficult thing to explain to people, because their thing is racism is a personal feeling, like they're thinking outright bigotry. The way that a system can have racially disparate outcomes because of the way it's designed, where in the 7-8 in Park Slope, Brooklyn, certain things are completely ignored, but 3 miles east in Brownsville, you better not dare. That is systemic racism. That is a violation of the 14th Amendment. If we were doing this citywide, I probably wouldn't even exist. All right, but we're not. We are specifically over policing in Black and brown communities, with the belief that, well, this is where people are getting shot. This is where, these major crimes are happening. So we need more police. So unlike many other folks, right, many other activists, the simple sight of police doesn't bother me, right? It's what they're being incentivized to do that's the problem. And in this new administration, we have 3 units that focus on things. So what one of the biggest changes between Bloomberg when I first came on the job, moving into de Blasio, and now is everyone had to produce the numbers when I came. Everyone was responsible, right? But that's how you get 700,000 stops. That's how you get, just unbelievable amount of enforcement that's racially, the racial outcomes. It's embarrassing, especially when it's for things that everyone does, right? But hold on, my train of thought just left. Just go ahead, John.
Yeah, so for me, I'm going to say absolutely not. I'm going to say absolutely not that the police department is not systemically racist. I'm going to go back onto my childhood. I was stopped countless times. I had guns pulled on me by the police countless times. I've gotten summonses for playing basketball in the park as the sun started to set. Over policing is a part of a quota-driven system. And I agree with you that that is a failure. That is a failure in public safety all around. And that brings cops and communities further apart. But what we were originally talking about broken windows, and I'm saying the theory itself. And you're really kind of painting a broad brush on the theory and bringing in that quota-driven policing. Like it's quota-driven. It's quotas that start to ruin good policing. And then when we go on to the racism end of it, listen, everybody's biased. I've encountered Black people, Black cops that are biased towards towards whites in white neighborhoods, and I've encountered Chinese people that are biased towards everyone in the neighborhood. I've encountered Spanish people that don't like Black people. Every individual is different, but overall, as a system, are Black neighborhoods currently in New York City, do they have more police in them? 1,000% they do. but the crime rate is much higher in those precincts, much, much higher. And I don't believe that the police department is utilizing, like you made a statement. You said that things are ignored in other neighborhoods. And I don't believe that's true. They're just not given that level of policing because they do not have that many cops. You go in some of these neighborhoods in Staten Island, there's 2 cars on the road for the night.
No, John.
Well, hold on, but before you jump in, Edwin, I want to ask John, when you keep referencing that the police locked you up, what was you doing to get locked up?
I got locked up. I'll tell you the 2 times I got locked up. I got locked up when I was 11 years old. 2 kids came over and started spray painting a wall, and they ran. I did nothing. I didn't run. I got locked up for that. I was on probation for 6 months for that. I was at 11 years old. I was charged with a felony criminal mischief for something I didn't even do. I got arrested one time. I was hanging out with 2 kids. I was with my girlfriend, and I saw two kids. They were smoking a joint as they said, "What's up?" to me. Narco rolled up, put the girl in handcuffs. I didn't even touch the joint. She didn't touch the joint. They said, and I said, I was like, don't lock her up, just lock me up. And they said, did you touch it? I said, yeah. I said, just leave her alone. So they locked me and 3 people up for criminal possession of marijuana. I spent a weekend in jail for absolutely nothing, for something I didn't do. And I mean, I understand what over policing is. Again, like I've said, I've had guns pulled on me for absolutely no reason by the New York City Police Department. I've been harassed. I saved my money up when I was a kid. I bought a Jaguar for $2,500. It was a nice looking car, but I spent all my money that I worked for to have it. And I got harassed every day because they thought I was dealing drugs just because I drove a Jaguar. I mean, every single day. I mean, so like when we talk, and again, these are white cops stopping me. They're not black cops. They're guys that live in my neighborhood. They're guys that live a neighborhood over or live in Brooklyn. They're not, and so to me, what do they do? When I look at it as a kid, what did I say? I said that they're bothering me because I'm Italian. They don't like Italians. And that was how I correlated it. But then now looking back on it as an older individual, as someone who's done police work, no, they were stopping me because I was hanging out in the park and people were dealing drugs in the park and people were drinking in the park and people were doing X, Y, and Z. And the community was complaining. So they were responding to community complaints and trying to see who the main players were. And what was that broken windows being deployed on me? Yes, that is a byproduct of broken windows. But the byproduct of going away from broken windows is a lot of crime. And that's what we're seeing now.
Yeah. Again, this is where we disagree the most. Absolutely ignored behavior. John, ignored. All right. I'm telling you, in certain parts, you see, that's the beauty of being in transit. We cover such a wide area. So you can jump on a train in 5 minutes, you're in the other part of Brooklyn. And I'm telling you, I would see certain behaviors when I would go upstairs to go to the deli. I would see certain things that I wouldn't see on the other side of the train, further down the train line in the other side of Brooklyn. And I would run into people from the academy, other people I recognize, and just, listen, if you're a cop in uniform, I'm going to come talk to you. And one of the questions we would always trade is, what's your quota, et cetera. It's not a matter of today we know there's issues in personnel in the numbers, but it's not a matter of the amount of officers assigned to the command. It's literally what they're expected and told to do. Now, is it to say that just because they're in a white area, they don't have to, they're not pressured to make any arrests, et cetera? No, but nowhere near how it is because of the belief of broken windows, nowhere near how it would be in Flatbush or Brownsville or Bed-Stuy. Again, you really think over 92% of people arrested for marijuana is a result of more cops just happen to be in the black community? John, you're smarter than that, man.
I am. And could I give you a reason for that?
Go ahead, man.
And what we never look at is the socioeconomic impact of the city, right? Why are black kids and brown kids and kids in the inner city getting locked up at a higher rate than kids on Staten Island? Why? Because there's woods on Staten Island. Kids have backyards in Staten Island. They smoke weed and they have places to go hide on Staten Island. Yeah. When you're out in Brooklyn, where are you hiding? In a project building where the cops are coming, on a roof where the cops are coming, out in a park where the cops are coming. And it's literally the makeup of what's going on in the city. I mean, every kid I grew up with was arrested for marijuana. It was policed so heavily that it wasn't even funny. Cars were searched. They would say, "Oh, I saw a leaf on the car, and I saw marijuana in your car." I mean, this was happening throughout the city. And again, I did anti-crime in the beginning of my career in the 123 precinct. It's the slowest precinct in the NYPD. I was expected to get 2 felony arrests a month, and they wanted 20 UF 250s a month. UF 250s is stop, question, frisk. They wanted me to come up with 20 people that I suspected of committing felony crimes such as robbery, burglary, GLA. Obviously, they don't even take those 20 crimes a month in that precinct. They still expected those numbers. And to me, that was a failure on the quota-driven system. Because what did you get out of that? You got bad stops. You got people putting names on paper and stopping people that didn't deserve to be stopped, or people getting summonses that probably shouldn't have gotten summonses. But for me, like I always said, I don't support quotas. But for me to get 2 arrests in a month in the slowest precinct in Staten Island, I could make that in a day. To me, it was hard to go out on patrol for one day and not arrest somebody just based on 911 calls that we were getting. So it's a catch-22 for me, and I never worked in transit, so I can't really speak on what you saw there. But from on the street, from working in Staten Island to working in Brooklyn to speaking to the other people doing the stuff, we all had the same quotas.
Now,
so
John, go ahead, Edwin. You can respond.
So, and I believe I shared this on your show. Someone I knew from the academy that would always jokingly tell me to get off my soapbox because I was outspoken even in the academy, which was very risky. But again, I thought as long as I could back up what I have to say and I was saying it intelligently, it shouldn't be a problem. And then one day he reached out and said, something happened that made him think about me immediately. And what it was a week prior, he arrested a white kid that had a book bag full of heroin. And rather than the lieutenant praise the arrest, especially with the fentanyl killing people, 5 times the murder rate, the lieutenant yelled at him because the arrest was outside of the zone. The following week, he arrested a black kid for not paying his fare, and he was able to get his day off because the way they had it is if you put in for a day off, you had to go get enforcement activity for it to get approved. And he was thinking, wait, we're literally having a crisis with people overdosing on drugs. I arrest someone with a book bag full of drugs and I get yelled at because it's outside of the zone. That's the excuse. So again, John, what makes broken windows racist is the quota, right? You can't separate it. The idea of focusing on minor things, I told you I could get down with that. Again, I don't think you have to come with a sledgehammer, but I think make the stop. Like when I was a platoon commander, I always told my cops, make the stop. If you give discretion, I'm all for it. If anything, the more innocuous the infraction, the wider the range of discretion. I will speak to the captain. Please bring me to CompStat. I will speak to those guys. As long as you guys are making the stop, I'm satisfied with that as your boss. That's what I told them. But again, the quotas specifically exist in certain areas, and this is how systemic racism works. Is it we hate black people, so we're just going to make the quotas higher in Brownsville? No, but because of the work of less than 1%, right? The violent crimes, less than 1%, we're going to over-police the entire area. That's where the problem is, John. For the life of me, I can't understand why you don't see.
But that's what I'm telling you.
That's systemic racism. Systemic racism is when you have a racially disparate outcome, right? And the thing about it, because it's systemic, it doesn't matter who's wearing the uniform. It doesn't matter who the boss is. As long as it's already interwoven into the fabric of the policy, it's already baked into the ingredients of the policy, we're going to end up with racially disparate outcomes. That's systemic racism 101. And the thing is, there are other ways to do it. And you're right. A lot of people, they'll criticize, they'll sound the bullhorn, but they won't give the alternative. And that's something that's very different about me. I will say, though, that's not what I speak about the most. But anyone that knows me knows, I'm always throwing out there what we should be doing. We'll get to that later. Just let Tramel,
Tramel, can I just respond 1 second? Oh, is he frozen?
No, I'm good.
I think Tramel's frozen.
Oh, Jamal's frozen? Okay.
All right, so I'm going to talk while he's
Go
frozen.
ahead, brother. Yeah.
So just like you just said, the 1% is responsible for the violent crime. And that's what I'm saying. Utilizing broken windows on that 1% is what we need to do.
But that's not what happens, Jay.
That's
That's
that
not what happens.
because it's weak leadership. But let me give you another example of my career and from my eyes. Right, white CO, white commanding officer. I'm the anti-crime sergeant. Okay, I get a pattern of car break-ins. Right, the neighborhood of car break-ins, it's predominantly Chinese and Hispanic. Right, I have a video of a Hispanic male doing it. I can't tell who it is. I just see that he's an Hispanic man, right? Could be white, could be Indian. I got an eyewitness saying he's an Hispanic. We set my team up at that time in the zone. We go in the zone, right? Because that's weak leadership. If I would have caught him out of the zone, it would have been a problem. And I agree with you. And that's weak leadership. It doesn't matter. So I see this kid. He's walking up and down the block at 2:00 in the morning. Marijuana is still illegal. He's smoking marijuana. I don't stop him. He clips the blunt. He puts the blunt in his pocket. He's checking door handles. Now, Brooklyn DA, technically that's a crime. If I checked your door handle, I excise control of your vehicle. Now, if he checked one door handle, could it have been a mistake? Sure. But this kid checked every door handle walking up blocks until
he's surfing.
Until he finally gets one. I have a younger cop that I'm training to do plainclothes work driving me. As soon as he gets in the car, he hits the gas. Kid jumps out of the car, slams the door, starts walking towards us. I'm like, stop. He has nothing from the car. He has nothing on him other than the blunt in his pocket. I lock him up. Hispanic male. He has about 10 prior arrests, 21 years old. Took no car break-ins that night. I get into work the next day. The next day I come into work and the CEO's like, what are you doing out there? I was like, what am I doing out there? He says to me, I thought we were protecting against Black and Hispanic males getting locked up for marijuana. I was like, I'm sorry. I was like, in case you weren't aware, and this is obviously the Bill de Blasio era, I said, in case you weren't aware, you have a grand larceny pattern from auto. I said, I was up in the zone. I changed my guys that night so we could go up there. I said, this kid was pulling door handles. I couldn't charge him with any of it because the DA is going to throw it out anyway. So I just brought him in for the night. I brought him in to question him. He gave me a few things, and that was it. And then that was it. But that wasn't considered good police work because I should have been arresting people for a felony.
Whoa. I disagree. I think that was excellent. I disagree. Listen, that's precision. Listen, that's precision. That's surveillance. That's intelligence. But John, that's not what happens out there, right? That's not what the overall arrest. Overall, when people are being when there's enforcement taking place, it's broad brush. It's not as precise as that. I could get down with that. That's surgical. But John, you can. Are you convinced that this is what we're doing out there? Because it's not, and you know it's not. That is not what we're doing out there. We're giving officers.
I'm not here to say that this thing was great. I'm here to say that it needs improvement.
Y'all hear me? Yeah. We for some reason the internet knocked out. I don't know what the hell was going on just now. So I came back and missed all the conversation myself. Yeah, but we still live. More people came on the live stream.
Yeah, we stayed live. People are commenting. So I think it kicked you out.
Oh, kicked me out. Yeah. Oh, okay.
You're not the host.
Well, I'm back.
John is the host now.
Yeah,
John
yeah.
Let me switch. Let me switch that. All right, good. Y'all was. I don't think y'all need me. I think y'all was carrying the conversation yourself.
No, listen. There's a. You chose the right folks to have this conversation. There's a respect there. We see where we differ in our perspectives. And again, when John describes how broken windows can be used effectively, again, that's not what I'm criticizing. I'm criticizing the broad brush, the zero tolerance, quota-driven broken windows, because that's what I walked into in 2008. That's what I realized were the reasons that I was stopped years before. And that's what continued to happen until serious reform measures came, not just my own activism, but different bills just exposing the lawsuits, from the Floyd case that worked on stop and frisk, the Stinton case that focused on summonses, and the NYPD 12 that focused on the arrests specifically. It took a lot of work. The decriminalization of marijuana from Ken Thompson, then it became citywide. There's Criminal Justice Reform Act in 2016 that, took a whole category of innocuous violations and made them oath summonses, civil summonses rather than criminal court summonses. It took it took a lot of work for us to get to the point of where the numbers are now. And the beauty is, if you look at the homicide numbers and even some of the other numbers in the 7 major crimes, the best years that we've had statistically is 2017, 2018, 2019. Obviously, once 2020 comes, we get COVID, and we're still essentially recovering from that spike in 2020. But how is it that all of these serious reforms happened starting in 2013 with the Floyd ruling, 2013 with the Floyd ruling, 2014 with the decriminalization of marijuana, 2016 with the NYPD 12 and the Criminal Justice Reform Act, and the following year we have less than 300 homicides. The year after that we have less than 300 homicides. Even I believe it was the Daily News that wrote an article that said we were wrong, because everyone, they blasted the judge that made the decision on stop and frisk. Bill Bratton said Ken Thompson is going to be responsible for bringing the city back to the bad old days because of the decriminalization of marijuana, less than 25 grams. You name it, every measure that came. I was a sergeant when the Criminal Justice Reform Act was passed, and the other sergeants at the desk was like, "Oh, the city's gonna, it's gonna go." It's going to go under. People are going to be pissing everywhere. We can't even write summonses anymore. No, we can still write the summons. We can still make the stop. We can still enforce the infraction. It just doesn't have to be a criminal court summons that can end up being a bench warrant and causing a whole slew of issues. And then the responses was, "Oh, well, then how about you don't piss in the street?" I agree with that. You understand? But again, for us to get to the point where we're at, John, it's not because of that beautiful example of how we can use even the innocuous infractions, but there was surveillance there was intelligence there. If everyone did it like that, again, I wouldn't exist, but it's because it's not done that way that I was forced to say something.
Let me ask a question real quick. How do you guys feel about after George Floyd got murdered, the defund the police movement? Did you guys agree with that?
I'll start. So this idea that police need not exist and have no use is false, right? And I've been in rooms with other activists who, some of them, they don't even speak to me anymore, right? And they're like, "Oh, a cop is a cop is a cop," and I'm like, well, the reason why you know me as an activist is because obviously when it comes to me, that's not true. I don't care. I have to feel right and grounded, no matter what side it is, right? But are police overworked? Do police wear too many hats? Yes. And are there things that police do that make no sense as a police law enforcement response? Yes. I believe if we have to reallocate some funding to either empower existing agencies or create subsidiaries of agencies in order to, like 311, for instance, even though you call 311, it's not an emergency, majority of those calls is still police responding, right? If we have to reallocate some of the funding so that it's police do not have to respond to certain things, I can get down with that. Most like EDP jobs, emotionally disturbed persons, outside of a weapon or violence, we don't need to respond to all of that. There are other agencies that can do that. We can even create agencies. We can have a joint response. When it comes to reallocating funds for those purposes, I'm all for it. Resources, mental health, I'm all for it. But we have to remember, defund the police does not mean reallocate. It is an abolitionist term. A lot of people are not aware of that. It means to defund, deflate, get rid of. Personally, I don't subscribe to that. I don't think that's the way to go.
John?
So, one, I don't support the defund the police movement at all. I don't agree with what Edwin's saying either. I believe that there's waste in the New York City Police Department and in departments throughout the country. Absolutely. I do. But I think there's waste in every agency. So I think we should look at those before we start to further pull back on public safety the way we've done. So I don't agree with that at all. I think defund the police movement, there was never, we were gonna take funds and give it to not-for-profits that have not been proven effective, that have no measures for success. They haven't. I'm sorry, they haven't.
Yeah, but I'm not saying to give it to nonprofits. Other city agencies that can do the work. That's what I'm saying.
I mean,
certain jobs. Now, obviously, there's things that it's a law enforcement response and it makes sense, but there are certain responses. There's like the amount of times I've been called because a kid didn't want to go to school. What this should not be a police matter at all. It shouldn't be.
Listen, that's something I never thought about like that. So that's like a conversation for another day, really. Like where do we divert these funds, whatever. But overall, defund the police movement, I don't support it at all. The other thing I'm going to push back on is the death of George Floyd. I don't believe that it was a murder. The autopsy showed that he overdosed. Was that video horrific? Should that officer have gotten off either his neck or his shoulder blade, because there are different body cameras that came out during that trial? Absolutely. I mean, I think in the NYPD, we're very cognizant of the look of things. But overall, George Floyd, his autopsy shows that he died of a fentanyl overdose. And
let me ask you a question. Let me ask you a question about that, John, because I think that on the last show we did together, what was the guy name that got killed in Staten Island? What was his name?
Eric Garner.
Eric Garner. You said that you felt that he wasn't killed by the police also?
Yes.
Is that right?
I don't feel that he was choked at all. He had a 93% blockage in his heart. He had a heart attack. Officer did not deploy a chokehold. He grabbed him from around the head, took him from the ground, got him on the ground, handcuffed him. As soon as he was handcuffed, he rolled him to his side to promote free breathing and called an ambulance. Exactly word for word how I was trained in the academy what to do. I've done that tactic numerous times by myself. Unfortunately, George Floyd was in very poor health. When his adrenaline rose, it did cause him to go into cardiac arrest, and he died. And it was a very, very unfortunate incident, and it's terrible that he died. But it was partly a result of his own action and another part of his health. The officer, for a chokehold to happen, the officer would have had to choke you. If I choke you, you're not going to say anything to me. And I mean, we've had numerous martial artists explain that over and over again.
All right, I'll jump in there. So I'll start with Eric Garner. John, you're right in terms of the takedown. We were taught, that seatbelt move, but where, from my observation, I believe what I saw, the officer stayed in that area a little too long. They stayed on his neck too long. The medical examiner ruled it a chokehold. So, I mean, I know folks said, "Oh, that's politics, etc." That's what the medical examiner ruled. I felt I've had to take folks down. I've been in those scrums, but staying on the neck, in that neck area that long, I don't know. And this idea that if you're getting choked, you can't talk, that's not true. Listen, I played wrestling with my cousins and my brother. I've been in that situation where it gets scary, but you get a little bit of, you get words out. That's not true. In terms of George Floyd, I know there was a documentary that a reporter made a few months ago. I did mean to watch it. I haven't. I know I would assume that's where your data's coming from. I'll watch it and we'll talk back. We'll get back to the George Floyd. But from what I observed, that officer was on that man's neck for too long. Just very important pipes over here. And again, from what the medical examiner ruled, if I remember well, it was ruled that the pressure on the neck led to death. But you're saying something else. Again, I'll check the data. I'll check the research. I'll even check the document. I saw the trailer. It's super biased documentary, but it happens. I'm still willing to check it out, and we can get back to George Floyd. But Eric Garner, that was bad tactics, honestly. Could there be other aggravating circumstances? I'm not ruling that out, but you really believe if Eric Garner was just walking about that day and was not stopped, he would have died at that same moment? I don't think you believe that, John.
I think that if Eric Garner had any scenario where his adrenaline would have raised that day, he would have died. Absolutely.
Yeah. But the officer was definitely on his neck. listen, when we get off this, go watch that video, man. That he was on the neck way too long. You know,
I've watched it hundreds of times.
Yeah, he was on the neck way too long.
So you,
I mean,
so John, you believe the police officers should have got off?
well, he did ultimately get off, didn't he? I mean, we had an Obama administration federally investigate him, and they cleared him. We had a New York City DA also investigate him, and they cleared him.
Oh no, I was talking about George. I was talking about George Floyd.
So George Floyd. Now, it's a weird thing because should he have been? Should he? For me, I don't believe that he was murdered. Should someone with that level of care for an individual be a police officer? I don't believe so. But when I watch the trial, when I watch a lot of those things, I think facts matter. And if the facts doesn't show that he died of asphyxiation from his neck being there, then that's not murder. If the facts show that, then that's murder and he should go to jail for murder. But that's not from what I saw. And way before that documentary, Edwin, I saw the autopsy and it said a fentanyl overdose. Now, could it have been wrong? I don't know. I'm not a medical expert. Could it have been some false information that I was given? I wasn't privy to the actual case trial, but I watched some of the case notes. And from what I saw, I said, it matters. It matters if he died as a result of what that officer did. The other problem that no one talks about is that this is how they're trained in Minneapolis. And that was also lied about. They trained to put their knee on your neck. And there's
I mean, that's a problem, obviously. Again, I'm gonna watch the doc. That's a problem. That makes absolutely no sense. That's a problem.
And again, my whole issue with the George Floyd thing, before you go, Tramel, just one thing I just want to say. My whole issue with the George Floyd thing is this. I see whatever the facts dictate, I believe. If the facts dictate that he was killed by asphyxiation, then it should be murder. If it doesn't, then he shouldn't. But how did we ever deem racism? That was my thing. It was a fact that this officer was racist from day one. And the only thing that we had to go on was that officer was white and George Floyd was black. And
I think they pulled up his record too. I think they looked into his record too, of his stops and things of that nature. When it happened. But let me switch gears a little bit.
I just want to share one scenario. And again, it's in some ways it's anecdotal, but this is part of the problem, right? There's an officer who was in narcotics, months away from getting his shield. And they were in Brooklyn North. And it was very strategic, very specific, the areas they would hit. But then one day in Williamsburg, they saw a group of white men doing the same things. And he called it out, and the sergeant was like, nah, they're good. And he was confused by that. And he kept pressing the issue days later. After he was off, he came back to work and he got a slip that he basically got kicked out of the unit. And he said prior to that experience, he didn't understand. This is a white cop, by the way. He didn't understand what black people were talking about. Prior to that experience, he said, he basically saw racism as a crutch that's used for people that don't want to essentially pull themselves up by their bootstrap, people that want handouts, etc. And he said that was the experience that made him realize, okay, maybe I have to look a little deeper. All right. And there's, again, so many people have reached out sharing these experiences that made them wake up. And even black cops, it's expected from black cops, but why it matters is these are black cops who were young, impressionable, malleable, completely bought into the way that policing was taught to them in terms of who we go after, what we go after. And it took years for them to realize, wait, why don't we ever do it on the other side of town when we know this stuff is happening there also? And that's what made them wake up and realize, wait, I'm being used because I'm here to enforce the law. So why are we ignoring it? And the last thing, commander in transit, my last commander before I got promoted, first I got kicked out of transit. If you even dared to write a summons to a white person, you had to go into his office and explain why. All right. It made everyone in the command so uncomfortable. You had to explain why you were going for soft targets. He was recorded by another officer doing this, right? He was recorded specifically asking the officer, why is it that he's writing summonses and arresting white people in South Brooklyn?
I know, I've never heard of that story. Now, just to switch
Michael
gears,
Birch. Michael Birch was the officer. You know, you can
is he
Google
still
his
working
name.
for
Everything.
NYPD?
No. He's retired now, and I believe that commander recently retired also. But you can Google Michael Birch, and everything comes up. The audio comes up. Several articles come up. You know, it's disgusting.
I definitely want to check that out. Let me ask you guys a question. And I want you to pick between the two: Eric Adams or Bill de Blasio.
Wow.
Those are your only two choices. Eric, I'm not gonna ask why yet, but Eric Adams or Bill de Blasio. Do I need to play the Jeopardy theme music?
Man, that's a so I'll be honest, man. Like I don't envy the current mayor, right? Because on one end, I expected more of the activist, you know, the guy that I watched since I was a kid. But what I think we've seen more so is just completely counterintuitive. He's leaned into things that he's spoken out against in the past, and I never expected that. So it bothers me a lot. I don't get it. I get it as the mayor. You know, heavy is the head that wears the crown. As the mayor, you need crime to go down, and if the people in your kitchen cabinet are telling you this is how we're going to do it, you know, these are the people that you've selected. These are the people that you have put your trust in, and you expect them to get it done. The problem is, who are those people, and what do they believe in? You know, if what those people believe in is contrary to your entire existence, either you change what those people are doing, or you change those people. And I hate to be speaking in parables, but if I had to choose between the two, damn, that's a tough one, man. That's a very tough one. Again, the Eric Adams the irony is, right, most people who dislike in the police department who dislike the current mayor, it's because of his past as an activist, right? I see it under your comments all the time, John. People that worked with him or worked when he worked, he was a this, he was a that, he's racist. You know, 100 blacks in law enforcement was seen as if they were the BLA. So that most people that dislike him in the police department is because of his time as a police officer when he was also an activist. The irony, and I know that's not your stance, John, but the irony is people that I honestly believe would be completely okay with what you refer to as the police state, John. I believe they would be completely okay with it if it wasn't Eric Adams. If it was Michael Bloomberg that started CRT and NST and all these you know, all these units that are hyper aggressive, I think most folks would be like, that's we have to be aggressive in these communities. There's guns, 13,000 guns. That's good police work. I think it's because the hate for Eric stemming from decades ago. It's one of those things where he can't do anything right, you know. But at the same time, my own criticism is just I expected more of the activists, more, you know, he has the opportunity to be the one. He has the opportunity to change how we respond to things. One thing that kills me is we don't redirect, especially young folks who get caught with guns or caught doing crimes. We don't have anything official in the city to redirect them. We have to rely on nonprofits and others. That's something that I was looking forward to, you know, with this mayor. You know, because of his own past, he's made it very clear that he's had trouble in the past and he was redirected by his mentor, etc. There's no reason why the city itself cannot have its own agency that deals with young folks when they come into police contact and help them see the bigger picture. You know, that's one of the responses, by the way, to how we get crime down. If we look at the age of who commits the most crime, they're young, man. You know, between 15 and 25, the majority of the major crimes that are happening in the city, that is a very young, impressionable age where we can still fix people, we can still get them on the right path. So I'm disappointed that we're not getting that. My disappointment with De Blasio, I mean, it's a little personal, but I think it's still legitimate. You know, when you have 12 officers that risk their careers and let you know what's going on in your police department, you can't ignore them, right? Same thing with the PBA. You can't ignore members of your union. You can't ignore members of the police department, especially if you're a self-proclaimed progressive. I believe if Bill de Blasio was the progressive that he said he was, he'd pull us into a room and say, what's going on? Not fight the lawsuit. I wouldn't even care to sue if I could get that round table. If I could get his audience and explain to him, this is what's going on, this is what we need to change. The fact that he didn't do that, to me, it forever soils his legacy. Now, granted, ironically, if you really look at the 8 years of de Blasio, NYPD benefited greatly, right? Technology upgrades, safety upgrades with panels on the cars and a soft armor. I mean, DOS Light. I know folks don't know what that is. The main I forget what DOS, DAS. DOS Light, basically, it's a system that, one, you needed a password for everything, for every single different system. DOS Light has allowed officers to conduct investigations in real time. There was a grand larceny auto situation I had when I was a sergeant, and we were able to stop it using DOS Light. I mean, the technology upgrades, the body-worn cameras, which is part of the federal monitor, et cetera, but it did happen under de Blasio. When you really look at the upgrades to policing, it was all under de Blasio, but they still hate him. From 2014, he was never able to get back on the positive track. And obviously, by the time we had George Floyd and the uprisings and the protests, they were already done with him. But his response to that, it was just, it was over for de Blasio. So if I had to choose, because I still get back to me on that one, man. That's a tough one. You know what I mean? That's a tough
John,
one.
So for me, I'll start with the current mayor. I have no idea who he is. I don't know who Eric Adams is. I know that he doesn't care about people. I know he truly doesn't care about people. When I saw what he did through that mandate, what he did to children, keeping them masked way longer than anyone in the country, where I saw that he was terminating people. Because again, did Bill de Blasio put that order in? He put that order in, but who enforced it? Eric Adams enforced that, and he enforced it harder than any other mayor in this country. So that right off the bat, I have no respect for him. What he did to women, he talks about a lot about his upbringing, about growing up poor, about how his mother had to work. And how would he have felt if his mother would have been thrown out of her career or forced to stick something in her body that she didn't want because a mayor said that, oh, well, you have to put this in you, even though you already have antibodies for it, even though you already got sick for it. So that right off the bat sparked something in me that I don't like Eric Adams. But to go on his policies, what are his policies? He's supposedly fighting crime, yet he's supported every piece of progressive legislation all the way down. He's cheered everything on. Anything that we could talk about, raise the age, bail reform, even the last thing that he vetoed, he supported the How Many Stops Act. So I support most of it. I just don't support the level 1 stops. And that's Eric Adams on every issue, right? The migrants are going to crush New York City, but keep the borders open, right? All I see from Eric Adams is failure, 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 right? And when we talk 3,000 gun arrests for the year, and we highlight that as that is something great to talk about. Yes, are the men and women in the New York City Police Department doing a great job? Yeah, but they're fighting against the tide. You know why they're getting 3,000 gun arrests? Because there's probably 30 or 40,000 people carrying guns on New York City streets that day. And that is a failure. People did not carry guns. They did not carry guns to this level, particularly under the Bloomberg administration. And then when we go to the Bill de Blasio era, he did get a great wave of where it was crime, but we were still deploying broken windows. And he was fundamentally changing the New York City Police Department and how we police. But as he did that, we still had anti-crime. Even when we pulled back on stop, question, and frisk, we were still enforcing minor crimes. So it kept crime down, an already down system where crime was flowing down. And look how far it's risen in just a short time from pulling back. When Bill de Blasio pulled his final blows, look how far we have went from 20 years.
I think that's unfair to de Blasio, man. Like, the COVID was a real game changer. Again,
how does a respiratory virus affect crime?
What do you mean?
How does a respiratory virus affect crime rising?
Prior to COVID, when can you walk into a bank with a ski mask on and it's okay?
But that, again, failure. And I said, if you go back, I said crime's going to go up. What are we doing? But we kept masks.
But that's how there's a direct correlation between the behaviors in responding to the virus and how, unfortunately, people that are up to no good exploited that, right? And to this day, unfortunately. You know, some cities have had to pass legislation saying that you cannot wear a mask anymore because people definitely took advantage of that. Also, people were told to stay inside. So the folks that were against that, it was sadly a lot easier to get your ops, right, to get your adversaries. And we saw a lot of that. Scooters, you name it. Also, especially in Queens of all places, homicide all around the city, right? From March, April 2020. There was a spike immediately. It correlated with the change in behavior in society. People staying inside, people covering their faces, and it's okay. In the command that I was in, there were folks, they had masks on and they did a push-in robbery. You know, we got it on camera. Again, they would not have been able to do that, wear those masks just a month, 2-3 months before. So that is how, it's not that COVID makes people go crazy and start committing crimes. It creates a condition that those who want to commit crimes get to exploit. You understand? I don't think that's fair to de Blasio, especially when
it was policy that he implemented
during his 8-year tenure. Again, we saw the lowest levels of crime despite the progressive legislation. And is that to say progressive legislation always gets it right? No. There are times when the pendulum absolutely swings way too far left. You understand? And I'll be the first to admit that. But you know, I'm looking at the comments and somebody referenced raise the age. The age of criminal responsibility, instead of it being 16, it becomes 18. I mean, you're still going to get arrested if you do something serious. It's just making sure you don't get thrown to the wolves for littering and jumping the turnstile, etc. It's not as if because of raise the age, if you commit a homicide, you know, it's a slap on the wrist. So that's all false. That's people just they don't understand when the pendulum is too far right either. Balance is the thing that we have been missing from this society, from this nation. It's what's tearing this nation apart, right? We need people that have the facts, that do the studies, that do the research, to sit in a room, even opposing sides, and use a dialectical method to arrive to what works.
Edwin, I would like to ask you a question, and I have to ask you this. You know, you retired, your retirement surprised me, right? I thought that you wouldn't retire for the simple fact we have a mayor who basically seemed like you guys was cut from the same cloth. As far as the activism was concerned, what made you retire and end your career early with Eric Adams in office? That to me, that didn't make any sense.
Yeah.
But did you feel that Eric Adams did not have your back or support your efforts, and he was a police officer?
So you know, full transparency, I was 11 years old watching the news, translating the news for my dad when I first saw Eric Adams. Right, it was after the Abner Louima, and I was just shocked because I couldn't believe he was a cop saying what he was saying. Did I know at 11 I was going to be a cop in 11 years? I didn't know that, right? But when I first got on the job, I saw him all the time. I worked in Crown Heights. That's where he was state senator. He became senator in 2006. I joined the police department in 2008. I was out there in 2009. And I saw him and I ran right up to him. I knew who he was. I shook his hand. I said, thank you for the inspiration in speaking out. And that was that, you know. And when he became borough president, again, ran into him all the time. became somewhat of a mentor. And then I started going through my own issues. And I have to be clear, like, he personally wrote a letter to Commissioner Bratton saying that in not promoting me is a mistake. He was there. He supported my efforts, which is part of the confusion. I'll be honest, everyone was like, oh, your boy just became mayor. You're going to be in charge of a security detail, et cetera. And I'm like, whoa, I don't want political patronage. I don't want a hookup. If Adam sees fit to bring me into the administration, I want the real work. I want the hard work. I want the difficult stuff. I know where my strengths are, but for whatever reason, that's not the direction that he's gone. And that's not the problem. The problem is where he went, right? I started seeing things with these units that didn't make sense. The Eric Adams that I know doesn't support this needlessly over aggressive stuff. Now, is there a job to do? Does law enforcement have a legitimate job? Yes. Conversely, do civilians always understand it? No. There are things that I'm so glad I'm in law enforcement that I understand that I would have never understood, no matter how much I tried, if I was never on the job. But with that said, after 22 years, building his base as an activist first, there are things that doesn't make sense, man. Like some of the ways that I saw these cops behaving, and I was faced with a difficult decision. Cops all around are reaching out for assistance, for guidance. Cops within the police department are telling me certain things are making its way back. And I was faced with a decision, and I said, I'm ready to amplify my voice. And I knew I didn't want to do that while still being in the police department. And, it wasn't an easy decision, man, but it's the decision that I made. And this is where I'm at now.
Got you. John, when I look on your timeline, I see a reoccurring name, and that name is Kaz Daughtry. And, speaking to police officer friends myself, it seems that this guy gets a lot of animosity based off of his relationships within NYPD, which allowed him to skip the ranks, so to speak. Do you feel like Kaz Daughtry is fit for that position of deputy commissioner right now?
I don't, but obviously Eric Adams does. And the reason you see his name a lot in my timeline is I've been heavily monitored, heavily attacked by the New York City Police Department. They wasted taxpayer fund to come after myself, my podcast, my co-host. I've had on-duty cops threaten me, talk about my wife, my children. I've had death threats against my children made from active on-duty cops. I've had criminal associates of the upper echelon of the NYPD come and threaten me as well. So I'm not a fan of him at all. I believe he's immature, egotistical. I think you see it in everything he does. I think you see a camera crew following this entire administration around. You see the push now. Now they're moving it towards the media. And I believe it's all coming from him. I do now. Am I against totally that he was promoted? No, because I'll be honest. If I was the mayor, I would bring people close to me that I trust, who I believe are competent in the position. However, in my opinion, I don't believe that he exhibits that competence. But to be fair, I don't see anyone in the upper echelon of the NYPD currently exhibiting any type of competence. I see a lot of compliance up there and a lot of lies being told to the public. And they're very confused right now. They're very confused politically, and they're very confused with their messaging. And I believe it all stems from Kaz Daughtry.
Now, Edwin, what do you think is the major differences between you and someone like a Kaz Daughtry, where, he was given that position and someone like you was not even put on like a special assignment by Eric Adams?
The mayor he left the department in 2016, right? The department has changed a lot. 2006, sorry. The department has changed a lot between 2006 and 2022 when he was inaugurated. One thing that he cannot have is for the crime numbers to go in the wrong direction. So at that point, he has to, his kitchen cabinet, in terms of who's responsible for public safety, he has to put people that he believes in that will solve the public safety issues. maybe he didn't think of me that way. He only saw me as the activist, the person that can speak out against when police are doing things wrong, and didn't realize that no, I'm so much more than that. The people that he did empower and appoint, they essentially gave us Commissioner Daughtry. I'd venture to say Eric barely knew who this guy was. He probably didn't even know who this guy was, honestly. But again, if you put your trust in people, and this is who they tell you they put their trust in, you're gonna listen to your cabinet. As a leader, you're supposed to appoint the right people and trust their leadership, especially if they've, you have to remember, the mayor left the police department as a captain. He wasn't captain for long. His assignment prior to that, I believe, was in Fort Greene. He wasn't captain for long. He became state senator shortly after. So, the workings in the executive ranks, I believe he leaned into his appointments to get that done. And that's how I believe we ended up with Commissioner Daughtry. I've dealt with, being in Brooklyn North, I've dealt with Commissioner Daughtry. Personally, I've never had an issue with him. In terms of him being in this position, I don't get it, but I'm not in the room. I don't know why that decision was made, but I'm not in the room.
Now, let me ask both of you guys a question. Have you ever felt that you had to compromise your values in any way, shape, form, or fashion being a police officer? Because I know Edwin, you in particular, you said you was outspoken during the police academy, and I'm quite sure you was asked to do things that didn't feel right within yourself. Did you still carry out those things as a police officer, even though you didn't feel right?
If the supervisor was there and my discretion was essentially taken away from me, there were things that that I'm not proud of, that were always within legal parameters. If it was unlawful, then I would stand firm. As long as it was legal and it was a lawful order, the discretion was taken from me. But once it was just left up to me, no way. I'd rather take the reprimand. I'd rather take the retaliation. It wasn't easy. I didn't enjoy it. I still, being transparent, I still suffer from insomnia. That was triggered in January of 2015 when I got my first low evaluation. I still haven't been able to sleep, from that first low evaluation. It's a little embarrassing, honestly, but this is the reality of what you go through when you understand that what you're doing is bigger than you. So I had a reputation very early, way before I ever spoke out. When I finally spoke out publicly, I promise you no one in my command was shocked, because I spoke out internally for years before I ever went, to the journalists.
How about you, John?
I think police work will test your soul. You'll work with people that don't understand the law. You'll work with people that aren't too intelligent. You'll work with people that'll ask you to do things that you'll never do. But me personally, my career, I think I'm more than proud of my career. I've never bent the law. I've never went against my morals or my integrity. Even from a rookie, like dealing with older guys getting thrown into a platoon. I've had, like I said, I came in, I was a street kid. I really wasn't afraid of going against the grain or being labeled as they think I'm an idiot, or I'm not playing the game, or I'm not being part of the union, or I'm not part of the team. I never really cared, because especially if it was something that I thought was wrong, if I thought they treated somebody wrong or anything like that. So I'm super proud of my career, and I've never bent my integrity, but I see how individuals do bend their integrity, and I see a lack of courage in a lot of men. And that's just not in police work. That's in all of society. And I see how people go bad in a lot of ways in life. And it could happen a lot easier in police work than it can in any other profession. So I think you just need to be a strong moral person to go over that. And, my theory on policing was, hey, listen, I have drug addict cousins. I have uncles that have been in jail. I have friends that have went to jail. I have people who have done the wrong thing and ended up on the streets homeless. I dealt with a lot of mental illness in my family as well. So I always attacked everything I did, every scene I was on, whether I was a cop, I was a supervisor, I was doing anti-crime. I always attacked it like, that's my crazy uncle, that's my dirtbag cousin, that's my drug addict friend. And that's how I looked at it. I always looked at it like, what would I expect the police to do if I'm looking at it from the outside? And that really steered my moral compass in the correct place. But so that's just what I said.
Got it. Now, Edwin, An Inconvenient Cop, you wrote this book. Before I ask you the question, I'm gonna play a clip from your play, and I will want you to explain what happened in that clip right there. So it's gonna be like 1 minute and 30 seconds, and you can elaborate on it later.
Sure.
After the clip over. So check it out, y'all. Matter of fact, let me fix that clip. Let me make it so everybody can see. But while we waiting, Edwin, what influenced you to write this book, to create change in policing in America?
Yeah. So, after becoming a whistleblower, I was called on for panels and TV shows, documentaries, reports, school reports, journalists, you name it, all types of research. And I basically saw the reoccurring questions that folks had. And I decided, if there was a central repository where people can get this information from my perspective, from my experiences, it's time to do that. And that's what inspired the book. And again, I decided memoir because rather than just transcribing data, I thought it was crucial that the people get to know the whole person. So very transparent. I talk about losing my mom and the poverty that I grew up in, the things that I witnessed in my neighborhood, also my racial consciousness, right? I was always in gifted classes, so that always put me, I went to a very white junior high school, and I was in the gifted classes where most of the white students were, and there were just certain things I would notice and certain things that stood out, that helped me understand, this nation a lot better. Socioeconomics, resources, politics. So I walked the reader through that whole journey into making the decision to join the police department and what I found when I got there. So there's a lot of information. I tediously, we cite the sources. If you look, there's footnotes everywhere. The book is designed for research. I want people to challenge what I'm saying. I want people to look at every article that was referenced, and understand that, this is my journey. Thankfully, a lot of it is documented. We're in the information age, so a lot of it could be cross-referenced with things in media and other sources.
And John, you've mentioned to me plenty of times that, or a few times, that you read the book. What in the book in particular that you disagree with, besides the broken windows? Is there anything else that you disagree with in the book?
I wouldn't say I disagree with anything. Like, again, I think, I respect Edwin, and why I respect Edwin is because he tells me how he feels, right? And how could I disregard his view of the world, right? I'm telling you my view of the world. Edwin's telling me his view of the world. I wouldn't say there's anything I totally disagree with in the book. I think when I read the book, I do see some bias from Edwin in there. I do. I hear a lot of statements like, oh, there was one statement in the book where you said, traditionally, my first experience with white people was in the police department. Traditionally, and forgive me if I misquote you, and feel free to correct me, but traditionally, Black people only work for white people. They don't work amongst white people as their peers. Something along the lines of that. And I'm like, it's a very narrowed in statement from your opinion. You know what I mean? And
that's not opinion, John. Listen. You're talking about exceptions. There are Black folks that are the boss of white folks. But overall, in terms of group dynamics, I promise you, most Black people are not peers with white folks. It's just the reality of this nation, right? And I mean, the tides are changing somewhat, but nowhere close to what you may think. Most most jobs, most Fortune 500 companies in the private sector, most jobs, even in the public sector. If anything, the public sector is probably where the numbers are a little better, depending on what city you're in. But if you truly look at racial dynamics in this nation, very few Black people have white folks as peers in the workforce. Very few. And I'll get statistics for you for that. After you read that, I would hope you would Google that. You could have Googled that.
I agree with you. I don't need the statistics. I agree with you that probably is the case, but that's your view of the world. That's your reality.
No, just the statistics support that though.
And then you take that same notion onto police work a lot and onto broken windows. And again, you paint, like, you take bad scenarios and broken windows, like we spoke about earlier, and you paint that broad brush on broken windows using those scenarios of poor leadership, of a racist cop. And I agree with you that those things happened. And I agree with you a lot. Like, you break down the quota system the best I've ever heard it. You actually describe a police officer the best description I've ever heard. It's right in the beginning of the book. It's probably one of the best descriptions I've ever heard, ever. I was like, wow, this is an unbelievable description of what it is to be a police officer, what a cop is, what society expects. But I think where we disagree the most is that you take broken windows and you paint it as racist, and you paint it as it's bias-based policing.
Not broken windows by itself, but it doesn't come by itself. It's an all-inclusive package, zero tolerance, quota-driven broken windows.
But
right?
What I'm saying is we got to fix it. I don't disregard anything that you said. I agree with you 1,000%.
And I agree with you, Jay. It's just, again, if it was just the bare bones of what broken windows is, which is just not ignoring minor things, I don't think anybody would protest that. But when we take exactly how it's been administered in the NYPD, that's what I'm focused on. You know what I mean? I mean, if I have to say zero tolerance, quota-based, broken windows policing every time, just for you, I will say that. But when I say broken windows, that's what I'm talking about. All right?
No, but that was all I'm trying to get at is I'm saying, I'm talking overall, you're talking in the past. I agree with you. In the past, it was used improperly, and it got worse and worse as time went on. The only reason the past changed, but Jay, the only reason it changed is because the work of progressives, like, I can't allow, like, unless it's self-corrective action, I can't make it seem as if just because the numbers are, like today, right? Like, immediately in 2014, we went from 700,000 stops nearly in 2011 to less than 46,000 in 2014. And you better believe the NYPD jumped behind it and say, look how much better we are. But the same people that were delivering that message were sitting in the court, trying to convince the judge that we weren't violating people's Fourth Amendments, right? So had they won, and you have to remember, Bloomberg appealed that decision. The only reason that appeal didn't go through is because when de Blasio became the executive, he dropped the appeal. So what if the stop and frisk case happened 2 years before and that appeal went through? We would have never changed that practice. You understand? So I can't, yes, things are different now, but it's not because of self-corrective action from the leadership. It is because of activism, legislation, litigation. And it's unfortunate because I believe we have enough talent in the NYPD from the people who have reached out. We have enough talent to get it right in-house. It's just those people don't rise to the top for different reasons, you know? But we'll talk more about that. Yeah.
Now, Edwin, I want to play the clip from your play, and I want you to explain them, what was going on here. Check it out.
Sure.
David, where you at?
I'm at Sean's house.
Do you see what time it is?
Oh, sorry, we were trying to get this game in.
David, I don't care about no game. Hurry up and get in this house right now, young man.
Okay, Mom. Sorry.
On the midnight shift, I also did a lot of prisoner transports. I'd come into work and automatically go check the cells because I'd have to take the prisoners to central booking, and I wanted to have some rapport with them in advance. If there was time, I'd look into their file, find out what the original warrant or charge was. One night there was a kid in there who was sitting quietly on the bench. I asked him what he was doing there.
What are you doing here?
My Metro card wasn't working.
What?
I mean, I slipped underneath the turnstile, and this undercover cop arrested me.
What do you mean he arrested you? What are you talking about?
No, he just arrested me.
For what?
I don't know, man. Said I can't jump the turnstile.
This kid was going into central booking? It still didn't make sense, so I got the whole story.
What was going on there, Edwin?
Yeah, so one of the assignments that I had regularly was prisoner transport, because I wasn't meeting the quota regularly. And, that was one of the punitive assignments. And what I would do is I would always go into the cells. I was on midnights at the time. I would always go into the cells to see who I'd be transporting, try to create a little bit of rapport, because sometimes people gave you a hard time. So in that particular night, it was a 16-year-old kid who was playing video games. His mother called and told him to come home. When he went to swipe his Metro card, it was a school card that ends at 9. It was after 9. So he waited for the train and went underneath the turnstile. There were 2 plainclothes cops downstairs. One was the admin guy, right? And he needed his quota. He needed his arrest for the month. And the other guy was my friend who was just doing the overtime with him. And in transit, a lot of the overtime is in plainclothes. So they arrest the kid because he didn't have ID. And this was the 3rd night that they went out. They were not able to get an arrest the previous 2 nights. The problem was, because he was under 19, you have to notify a parent or guardian. But what happened in Brooklyn is basically the DA stopped accepting arrests for no ID for young folks, because basically the argument is, if you're able to make the notification, you essentially identified the kid. Therefore, give a summons if you're going to give a summons, or let the kid go. So just to make sure that the arrest stayed, they purposely did not even try to call the kid's mom. And the procedure, if you try to make a notification and you're unsuccessful, is you then have to do a missing persons report. So they purposely bypassed trying to call the kid's mom and just did the missing persons report, just so the arrest could stick. And this kid this was like a very nerdy video game type kid. And I was just livid. Like, this is who I'm going to be taking to central bookings. And so I spoke to the officer, the one I was cool with. And, we had a very fiery exchange. He's my brother to this day. I love him. But, I had to tell him, like, what are you doing? What is this? And the argument was basically, you're part of this job, Ray, as he calls me. I get it. I don't like this. I have kids. I wouldn't want my kids to be under this. But when you sign up for the job, and this is what the job is expecting of you, you do what you got to do. He's a military guy. He told me there are many things he did in Iraq that made no sense, but he put himself in Iraq when he signed up for the Marines. So there's nothing that he could do about the situation then. And, we clashed on that. Today, he gets it, but we definitely clashed on that. And I was so disgusted by that. I said, this is what we're doing. Just in the name of getting numbers, we're putting a 16-year-old kid that had no police contact to not just arresting him and giving him a desk appearance ticket, but putting him through the system. It bothered me. It bothered me a lot, man.
So I want to ask both of you guys a question. Edwin, I know that you don't have no children, and John, you do have children. Under the current NYPD views right now, how everything's functioning, if your child wanted to be a cop in New York City, what would you tell them?
Absolutely not. Absolutely.
Why?
Absolutely not. You want to have a normal life. You want to spend time with your family. You want to be able to have time off. You want to be able to sleep at night. You don't want to be able on a moment's notice, never know your schedule. You only know when you have vacation. You get criticized by everybody and everything. You go out to do the right thing, and literally you take it home with you. Everything you do will be criticized 8 ways to Sunday. You could go out there and do the best that you could do every day, and you'll go home at night and sleep in bed at night and wonder, how is this job, the politics of this city, how is it going to come back and get me? And that's the things that people worry about. It's not you risking your life that cops worry about. They worry about the financial impact. They worry about their criminal liability and their personal liability. And honestly, I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy at this point.
Edwin?
I mean, everything that John said in the beginning in terms of how much you miss out, how much you have to sacrifice, it's an unfortunate reality in the job, and I don't think that can change. But as much as, those, I don't enjoy that part of it, my reasoning is more so because, including that, but more so, I would say, again, the way it is now, no, I wouldn't want my children to be in the way police are hated. I wouldn't want my children working any protest. I wouldn't want, no way, no way, no way. Hypothetically speaking, obviously I'm not a father yet. No, the way it is now, no, like John said, not on my worst enemy. It's not, it can improve. It has so much potential, but it's just not there yet.
Do you guys think that's the reason why NYPD have a problem right now retaining officers or even getting officers to the job?
100%, 100%. It's actually scary, where the numbers are. The rate of attrition is terrible. It's a big problem. Recruitment is just not what it should be at all. It's a legacy job. So a lot of people, their family members, they have an uncle or, father, mother, etc. But even that's starting to slow down also. So I don't know what's going to change that. But right now, especially with Gen Z, they're not coming in. They're not coming on the job in the numbers that they once were. If you look at a lot of the recruits there, they're closer to 30 or a little past 30 from at least from my observation. It's a problem. For a job that you can start as young as 21, it's a problem.
Now, okay, John, you want to say something?
Yeah, I just want to say we demonize the profession so much that young people don't want it, and then they lost their best recruitment tool. Look at me and Edwin at this point, sitting here on the show. We should both be running commands in the NYPD right now. We shouldn't be doing what we're doing at this point in time. And they lost their best mouthpieces and their best recruiting tool, which is the men and women that serve. You go out amongst your peers, your neighborhood. You go out, you speak to, even if you don't have your own children, you speak to your friends' children, the kids that you grow up around, the younger kids in your neighborhood, and you do the recruiting for the NYPD, and they lost that. And that's basically why you're seeing this.
Yeah. So I have a couple of more questions before we get out of here. Now, listening to your story, John, saying that, they basically sent people to threaten you because of your opinion on certain things. Edwin, I'm quite sure you probably feared for your life one time or another because of you being outspoken. Now, you guys are police officers, and they send in gangsters, whoever they may be, to come threaten police officers. How can a regular citizen like myself have a chance to protect myself when they are threatening police officers?
I honestly, listen, I think ultimately at the end of the day, do I fear for my life? I'm outspoken. I get a lot of threats from a lot of different people, not just the police department. But I think ultimately it just shows their level of immaturity. And it shows that they should not be in charge. This administration in particular, I did file complaints against them. I am going to seek legal action against them as well. And since I filed complaints on them, everything has ceased.
I don't see your life being threatened as immaturity. I think that it's a deeper problem than being immature. But Edwin, what are your thoughts?
The time that it got crucial for me was in 2017. I did a press conference, and it was so bad that the police department actually assigned a detective to monitor threats. But you know, I'm it is what it is, man. I understood the risk that I was taking in speaking out. I'm at peace with however things, whatever happens, it is what it is, man. I'm not worried. It is what it is.
Now I want to play this last video about Cass Daughtry explaining the metal detectors in the subways. And I just want to give me your opinion on what you see here. And check it out.
To the show, they sound like a good singer, but they don't turn their chair around, and then when they turn the chair around, they say, "Listen, you know, come back next time, keep working on your skills. You know, you have some potential." This time we turned our chair around, but they may not win, so we went to test them out. So, Mike, Vlad, Scott, Brad, you ready? Let's do it. You guys ready? Okay.
Now, I don't need to play the whole entire video. Quite sure we seen it. Now, for me, this wasn't a spectacle, because like a couple of days after that, the CEO of the scanner system said that the subways are not a best use, or you know, it's not a good use in the subways, basically what it said. And it seems to me as if when NYPD is on the hot seat, they go straight into PR mode to try to change or control the narrative. Now, the two questions that I have is, besides the CEO of that company, I think it's called Evolve or Enron, whatever it is, he said it wouldn't work. But what do you think about the idea? Because I don't feel like it's a bad idea, but I just think that it's a Band-Aid for PR purposes as far as what they're doing. But how you guys feel about that whole scanner stuff?
I mean, what makes the subway unique from, say, the airport, it has to be rapid access. You know, that's what makes it work. You know, millions of people move through it in a day. Right now, where that technology is at, again, for the admission of the CEO, it's just not there. Like, I get the idea. Like you said, it's not a bad idea, but it's not there. But then the issue becomes, right now, there are people who are authorized to carry guns also. So, you know, and then, so how do we differentiate between that? The personnel that you would need to monitor in real time, if there's going to be some sort of immediate response, if someone is unauthorized to carry the gun, it's not practical. I don't think it's pragmatic.
I think your level of discernment spot on. I think that it's completely a dog and pony show. They're just jumping on, you know, even though they're telling us crime's down. You know, it's like everything else. I'm going to deploy 1,000 cops into the subways, and it's an unsustainable thing. We saw it with the robot, right? The robot was going to be the next thing in subway crime. Where'd the robot go? The robot ended up in a broom closet. And these scanners, they're not going to be in every subway station, right? They're going to be in the main ones for a show, right? And what do they need? They need cops to them. Why do they need cops? Because it's not eliminating the amount of stops cops are going to have. It might actually increase the amount of stops, the amount of times cops are going to stop people. I mean, and we saw clearly on that video that it failed, you know? And so I think the whole thing's ridiculous. I think they should also let everyone know where they got the name of that company from. It was from a project that I worked on over 4 years ago. And it wasn't told to me that it was going to go into the subway stations, just that it would go into, it would be if there was any technology out there to detect firearms. And basically a quick Google search revealed that this company is utilized many times in arenas. So I think that's another thing. So, you know, for Eric Adams to say this is our Sputnik moment, I don't know what planet he's on, but this is definitely not our Sputnik moment.
Now, our final topic, speaking of Eric Adams again, he was on the Breakfast Club, and you had the lawyer Olayemi Olorin on there, and I felt that Eric Adams was ambushed, but he should be able to answer these questions. What were your thoughts on that interview and the lawyer and the combativeness between the mayor and Miss Olorin?
I'll go first. So I think that I agree with you. I think he was ambushed. I don't think that it was proper to do. I do agree with Miss O'Lorian where she said that, you know, we shouldn't have to handle our elected with kid gloves, and I agree with that. They should be asked hard questions, but I do think it should be done respectfully. I do believe a lot of what she said, she didn't back up while she was saying it, but she did expose Eric Adams for exactly what he is. He's for everything and he's against everything. He played Mr. Progressive until Mrs. Progressive was there, and she put him in his place, right? Every time, and any situation, he flip-flopped. He was for something and then he was immediately against it. And she had no problem calling him out on it. So and a lot of the things she talked about, I think it was completely wrong when she, you know, kind of casually spoke about the murder of a police officer. I think that was wrong. But I think overall, I mean, I think he failed miserably in that. Even with him being attacked and it was an ambush, I think he failed miserably in showing a clear stance on where he is on any of the topics that she brought up.
Yeah, he didn't seem as prepared as you know. He didn't seem too prepared. So some of the points that she made, you know, I was like, okay, you know, there's a legitimate question. I hope he has an answer. Some of her points needed a little tightening up. You know, I've spoken to several people about, you know, just the respect factor, because he is still the mayor. Some people, they're like, listen, you know, it is what it is. You know, I say they do it again. I don't know. I want to see, because I think one of the strong points that she made was, while campaigning, the fact that there's crime is one of the things that the mayor used to say why he's the guy that we all need. But then I remember not too long into the administration, you know, they called out the media for always reporting the crime. And it's like, wait, you know, when that same media reporting the crime was advantageous at one point, but now that you are the person incumbent, you're not too happy about it. So she caught that. She caught that, and he didn't really have much of a response for it. And also, in terms of the leadership of the police department, I thought that was very clever when she said, well, even their own tweets create this atmosphere of, you know, that crime is coming to take us all because of progressive policies. And regardless of the why, you know, if your own leadership is saying crime is an issue, but then at the lectern or podium, you're saying it's not, it's very conflicting. And she called him out, you know, she called it out properly.
Got it. Anything that you guys, one question that you would like to ask each other?
I think I said this before, but I want to, there's just so many things you and Eric, you know, shout out to Eric Dim. There's so many things that you guys have spoken about, and I'm glad, right? But I just can't, it's hard to ignore the fact that if it wasn't you, like if it was me saying those things, I'd be the rat, I'd be the snitch, I'd be the malcontent, the zero, there's so many other things. And that's the nice stuff, right? Then it gets racist, very racist. Some of the stuff I've read online. And so my question is, do you acknowledge that there's a difference there, that when you say it, it's okay? When you, like you said it, how you said, you know, you don't like quotes. Someone keeps writing your comment on quotas. You've made it clear you don't support the quotas, but when I don't support the quotas, it's because I'm a zero. You understand? Do you acknowledge that difference?
Yeah, well, I even told you that when you initially came out, before I spoke to you, that's what I thought as well. I did. And I'm not going to lie. That's exactly what I thought. I was like, he's just a zero. He just doesn't want to do his job. But as I got older and smarter, I'm like, you know what? He's right. It really is causing a thrift in the communities. It 1000% is. Now, again, I don't support the quotas. I don't. But I also don't support cops not doing their job either. You know, so when there's a problem, I do, like I said, I was an active cop. I was in anti-crime. My mindset towards policing is a proactive stance. Like I said, I was always up on the 61s and chasing patterns. You know, I wanted to be a detective in the major case squad. That's when it didn't work out for me. But like that's how I went. So I never understood that argument at that time. But looking as an adult, as a father, do I want my children getting stopped coming off the bus? Because I mean that scenario that you highlighted in your book, I mean, it's absolutely disgusting. I mean, that should have never happened to that kid. I mean, that's all right, get out of here. See you later. You know, you need anything, you need help. You know, that's not even write someone's name on a piece of paper. That is, all right, be on your way, young man, get home. You know, so there are a lot of failures in that. So yeah, there's absolutely, listen, there's always going to be a difference. And online, listen, there's a lot of idiots. They don't have to stand behind those words. And it's a lot different with us, right? We use our own names and we stand behind everything we say. And, you know, you get a lot of people online that, you know, they're coming up with these fake names and these fake pictures, and they're not standing behind their words. They're not standing by their opinions. And yeah, absolutely. I acknowledge that there's definitely differences, but you see it with me as well, right? I'm a rat. I'm a zero. I'm a do nothing. I mean, I had the upper echelon of the NYPD calling me a zero online on social media.
I wasn't aware of that.
On Twitter. And I just had to remind them. I have
I was not aware of that.
Yeah. And so I said, if I'm a zero, explain to me Eric Adams' career. Tell me what he is. Tell me what your boss is, you know? And like, so if I'm a zero, he's definitely a zero. And then you guys are a zero too, because I've made more arrests than you. And like, you know, I was a BMS warrior on Twitter. Like that's what they called me. John Shell called me that. Because I worked in the building maintenance section at one point. So, you know, so I've been attacked a lot as well. So I see it. Okay. And like I said, I was a critic of you at one point, and now I understand the argument you're coming from. And I'll tell you, your book helped me even see it even more. I thought it was one of the best books I ever read. And I enjoyed listening to it more than when I read it. Because you know, so it was so I do have one question for you, Edwin, though.
Sure.
It's a hypothetical.
Mm-hmm.
We're in China. We have a burglary problem. Okay? We have a burglary problem, or any crime you want to say, burglary, robbery, whatever it is. The whole country's Chinese. We don't have white people. We don't have Chinese people. We don't have Italians. We don't have Hispanics. Everybody's Chinese. What would you implement to bring down whatever crime pattern we were having? What type of policing would you want to see to contribute to bring down crime? I know it's a very overall question, but specifically if we went on to, let's say we were getting a burglary pattern in China at a certain time period, Chinese males ages 17 to 25. What would you do to bring it down?
Okay. All right. So in a racially homogenous society, what would be the tactics? I mean, what it should be in any society. I think we have to use intelligence, technology, and, you know, we do have to enforce, right? But intelligence and technology. Like, I don't think we use intelligence enough. I've seen FIOs do amazing things. Nobody's rights had to get violated. They worked off of the intelligence. I think you were an FIO. I think you mentioned that, right? I didn't know that until I watched your first interview with Trammell. I think that's what we focus on primarily: intelligence and whatever technology we have available. Obviously, we have surveillance technology, et cetera, that creates more intelligence that we can then work on. But for burglary, but you know, it's kind of it's a wide question.
It's a broad question.
Yeah, because it all depends on exactly what it is that we're trying to suppress. But if burglary is the issue, I say we use intelligence and technology and surveillance, similar to what you did in that perfect scenario. You know, you as much as it was an innocuous infraction, right? By starting with the double park car and using the marijuana, it really wasn't, man. That was you being intelligent enough to pay attention to the right things and using intelligence, using your surveillance. It's to me that was so much more than the randomness of how broken windows gets applied. But I think we're starting to see. I think we're starting to understand each other a little bit more. Again, when I say broken windows, it's not the idea in itself that I'm demonizing. It's how it was done. Zero tolerance, quota driven. But I'll think more about this Chinese question and get back to you.
Listen, Edwin, I can't let you off the hook.
Yeah.
De Blasio, Eric Adams.
Oh man. Oh man. Oof, it's a tough one, man. That's a tough one because I'm not really liking what I see on with either. But if I had to,
Elections were today. Those were your two choices. Who you voting for?
Uncommitted. Let me stop. I'm RFK. Wow.
It's an RFK. Do these conversations happen between officers on the job? These type of dynamic conversations?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Like what me and John are doing?
Yes.
I mean, somewhat. I mean, I'm willing to go there, but for the most part, John, correct me or give me your perspective. It's more groupthink than, it's kind of more groupthink. Like if officers feel different, they're probably just not saying anything. That's what I've gotten. Very few are willing to go toe to toe.
I mean, you a polarizing figure though in the NY. For me, I was able to have open conversations.
You're right. Yeah.
You were definitely looked at a lot differently. You were out.
Yeah.
You were well known. Everybody knew who you were. You know what I mean? Well,
Yeah.
it was definitely a different environment for you. Like for me, I spoke to everybody. I did 2 years in internal affairs, and most of my staff actually the entirety of my staff was Black and brown, and we had very political conversations. And other sergeants would come in and be like, "How the hell do you have these conversations? Nobody files a complaint on you." I'm like, "Because I'm just human."
Yeah, well, I'll tell you. Prior to me being a whistleblower, I was also able to do that, and I wrote about I wrote about some of it in the memoir. But I'm not gonna lie. After whistleblower, nobody wanted to have these conversations. But of the two, I think this is the toughest question I've ever gotten, man, because I'm playing it all back from de Blasio. I'm seeing what the last 2 years have been. I think it was a little bit more organized than the de Blasio, so I'd have to say de Blasio.
You're voting for de Blasio.
It was more organized than the de Blasio.
I'm tweeting it right now. Edwin Raymond.
Yeah, in terms of structure and being organized, that eliminating, suppressing all the other issues that I have. That's the deciding factor for me to make that decision. But in reality, man, like hypothetical aside, I'm not. I'd probably sit that election out, man, because man, yeah, it's. I mean, listen, Eric still has time to turn it around. He still has time to turn it around. But in the Power 105 in the Charlemagne interview, he seems to see himself differently from how he's perceived, right? But at the same time, I left from community affairs. Listen, these people are eating out of the palm of his hands. Like, those community meetings, he knows who votes. One thing about Eric, he knows who's going to actually vote. And those folks, politically speaking, as a former candidate, who understands the system so much better now, you kind of focus on the people who vote. Whatever they want is what you're going to do. So you're not going to pay attention to social media too much. You're not going to, because believe it or not, like people have been superstars on social media. They've run for office and it's been lackluster. So, it's about who actually shows up to the polls. And as long as those folks are satisfied, I don't think the mayor sees where he can be stronger.
Got it. Now, a final word that you would give to your fellow police officers that's on the job right now. If you could give them one word of advice, what would it be?
I'll start, Jane. One thing, because I watched people first question what's being asked of them before they conform. And I want people to remember that part. Like, I want people to remember why they got started. Most people, I can comfortably say, did not join police to be brutal, to be racist, despite where they felt, where their biases were. Does that exist? Of course. Most people needed a job. Most people, this is a job that a lot of word of mouth is how people join. Sometimes what they see on TV. Just remember why you got started in the first place. Like just stay grounded in who you are. That's my advice. Whenever I see recruits, I always walk up to them. I let them know, I'm either, when I was on the job, now that I'm, off the job, I say, just remember why you got started.
John?
I would say the same exact thing. I'd say take tests, go up through the ranks, read everything, understand everything that's going on in your command. And like I said, treat people like they're your family. Treat people like they're your friend that went off. And that's not to say that you're going to have to use force at times. That's not to say that you're going to give them the upper hand on you, because you're never going to give anyone the upper hand on you, right? The ultimate goal at the end of the day is for you to go home to your loved ones. So, but when you approach things from that perspective, your moral compass is a lot higher. And it never failed me. And, I've done thousands of stops. I was involved in thousands of arrests, and it never failed me, thankfully, without incident, by the good graces of God. I don't think it was anything to do with my skill or that I was a great cop or anything like that. But I do think that a lot of times my perspective on things, my ability to communicate with people, and my ability to step outside of scenarios and look at it as how I would be judged later, or how I would judge myself, or how society should judge me is big. So, to the men and women that are still doing law enforcement during this time, big shout out to you. I mean, it's a thankless job, and you're the doer of deeds. It's not the critic that counts. I'm a critic now. Edwin's a critic, and you're going to be critic eight ways to Sunday, but make sure whatever you do, it's you that did it. It's your decision that you made. And it's one that you could go to bed with at night and put your head on the pillow with and live with. And if you do that, you hopefully, when God's good graces, you'll have a good career and you'll retire.
You just made me think of a question. Why do police officers correlate the number of arrests to being a good cop?
So, I mean, for me personally, I think that shows how, what is our core mission to protect and preserve life, right? To protect and preserve life. So now I'm in whatever community you put me in, and what's my job ultimately? It's to respond to the community's complaints, right? So your house gets broken into. Shouldn't I be going to look for the person that does it? Your car gets broken into. Shouldn't I be the person that's looking to do that? When you call up the precinct and you tell me that there's kids using drugs in the park, shouldn't I be the person responding there to go there? So I do believe that arrest numbers do correlate when you're a police officer. They correlate to how much you effectively policed, how much you took into the mission of policing. Because like I said, I was in New York City 2 months ago, and I drove to go do a podcast. And one of the questions was about the quota system. And I said, I'm totally against quotas. My quota was to make 2 felony arrests a month. I said, however, I could have just made 6 on my way over here. And it still holds true to today. So, does that mean that you're a terrible cop if you have no arrests? I don't think so, because I think in every profession and anything you do, right? Like if we were on a basketball team, does the guy that scores the most points, is he the best team player? Maybe not. Maybe it's the guy that passes the ball the most, or maybe it's the guy that plays the best defense. So I think there's everything. I think everyone has a mission and everyone has a goal, as long as you buy into the mission. But I do believe when you're a younger cop, and you get into, before you go into the supervisor ranks, I do believe that arrests do correlate with work ethic. I do.
You agree, Edwin?
I quality arrest, sure, but arrests for the sake of arrest, no way.
I agree.
Because
100.
Yeah, quality arrest, sure. But I do also believe that conditions should be addressed. I don't think addressing a condition and arrest and summons are synonymous, though. You understand? I think, like I always told my cops, make the stop, engage, talk to people. If it's something minor, give the warning. I don't mind it, but I want you to make the stop. I don't want you ignoring things just because they're minor. There's a way to do it in a jovial way, even. You understand? But those are skills that unfortunately is not encouraged because they want the widget. They want the number. Everyone I know that was a hammer, which is the term we use for someone that's getting numbers way past the quota. I would always ask them because they would always get into the whatever positions that they would want, whatever units. And I would always ask them jokingly, all those arrests that you made back in the days, how does that help you in your investigations today? And they would bust out laughing because they know it does nothing. But this is the metric that the upper echelon sets. And again, people respond to incentives. So they go along with it. And then they believe in it themselves and they perpetuate it when they ascend it. And that's how we get a cycle. But quality arrest, 100%. Arrest for the sake of arrest, nah, not a fan of it.
Got it. Now let the people know where they could get your book from, where they could follow you on social media.
Sure.
And then John, you could tell them where to follow you, what you got going on, your podcast,
sure,
things of that nature.
So on Twitter, it's Edwin Raymond NYC. On Instagram, it's Edwin Raymond or E.Raymond_. The book, thankfully, is available everywhere. Shout out to Penguin Random House, Viking Books. It's a major book deal. Number one publisher in the world. You can go on Amazon. Some people are opposed to Amazon. You can go on Barnes & Noble. You can walk into most bookstores. It should be there. I'm thankful for everyone who's read it. I'm thankful for those who didn't necessarily agree with me, but then they kind of understand my perspective more. And I'm hoping it really becomes a tool to move the needle.
Yes. Yeah, I use my name for everything. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram. My podcast is New York's finest retired and unfiltered podcast. It's the finest unfiltered for short. I'm on YouTube. I'm on Rumble. I'm anywhere where you could get audio podcasts. My co-host is the most complained about cop in the NYPD, meaning he has the most amount of civilian complaints. Eric S. Dim. He's a combat veteran. We have conversations just like this. We've had Edwin on. We're going to have him on again in the future, I hope. And this is what we do. We try to move the needle and just to have conversations. We're not saying we're right. We're not saying we're wrong. This is just how we think, and let's talk about it. And we're trying to do what hasn't been done in the past, is trying to humanize the profession where it needs to be done at this point, because I do believe that law enforcement has been so heavily demonized that we're not looked at as individuals. If I'm standing next to Edwin, he's a dirty cop and I'm a dirty cop, and that is it. That's how society looks at us. It has a lot to do with the media. It has a lot to do when you look at movies about police officers, and they don't see two individuals. They don't know that we have families, that we care, we have hearts, we think, we feel. So that's just what I've been doing. And I'm on social media. I start a lot of political discussions. I'm sure some people agree, some people won't agree. But, that's just what I've been doing in retirement. I'm having a ton of fun, and I always appreciate coming on platforms like this. And Tramel, I appreciate you having me on a second time. And Edwin, it's always a pleasure. Online, offline, I always love talking to you. I always feel like I come out of it better and smarter. And I definitely recommend everybody get Edwin's book.
I would definitely love to do this with you guys again. And John, I would like to, I'm going to invite you to Edwin Play. I think that the play is fantastic. I think everyone in the community should see it. I think other NYPD officers should see it. I mean, I was blown away. Edwin is a friend of mine, and I underestimated how great the acting was, the storytelling was, how it correlated to the book after reading the book. I think everyone should get it. So I'm excited for when Edwin bring it back. And like I said, I would definitely love to have you guys back on to discuss more things, like to talk about the cop who killed the guy with the cooler and things of that nature. I know we all familiar with that, but we could do that, some weeks down the line. But for everyone watching, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe. This is probably one of the most important interviews that I have ever done, and I hope the people appreciate it. And I would like to thank you guys once again for joining me. John, this is not going to be the last time that you be here. Edwin, I think this is like my second, third time probably interviewing you in this form of fashion. Thank you. I know that you guys are busy and have your own things going on. Thanks to everybody tuning in. We kept a great amount of people watching this entire time. And I'll catch you guys later. Peace.